We've come up with 4 main topics. We're going to take 30 minutes and probably just a little bit more and talk about the specifics of taking your pet with you. Because one of the things that I realized once I figured out how to do it in a way that made sense, it was nice to not have to choose between the car or taking the dog with me. And so if I could combine the bicycle trip and the pet trip, that was like a mind-blowing and like groundbreaking thing, and very exciting that I could combine the pet with the bike in some way and then get to where I'm going. So we're going to talk about things to look out for, why that's a good thing, why there's some dangers associated with it, and maybe joined by some special guests. We'll see. Cool. So let's go ahead and advance that slide. So topic 1 is specifically about before we're even doing anything, before we're considering what type of mechanism we're going to use, before we're considering how far we're going, any of that stuff. First of all, is the dog, is the pet, is the cat, whatever it is, ready to ride? I think we're going to focus on mammals. If you had like a goldfish or something.
I think that makes sense. I have to. When I was in college, we had chickens that we would move places by bike because we had a mobile coop. And so someone had designed this awesome chicken coop that you could put all the chickens in, you could tow it behind a bike, and then you could set them up places and they would kind of, eat away at the stuff in the lawn, and then they could move themselves. So it was mobile in multiple ways. I don't know a whole lot beyond that fact that someone hand-built a chicken coop on wheels.
For Christmas, we got my dad a leash for his chickens. And it's a little harness that goes around the wings and then attaches to a leash. And so they didn't really like it, but it means that there's a chance. Like, it's possible that you could ride your bike with your chicken.
I'm going to add in, this is also a mammal, but I'm going to add in biking with goats because someone down the block does that sometimes. So I'll talk about that too. It's awesome.
Okay, so I guess ways to get the pet ready to ride. I think it's like anything else, small steps, baby steps. So if it's a trailer, then the goal isn't to, on the first day you bring the trailer home, get the pet in the trailer and start riding the bike. The goal is get the pet familiar with the trailer, sniff it out, hang out with it, put treats in there, that kind of thing. The same for a backpack type situation. We'll get into more specifics on that. But again, rushing things is going to make the whole process take longer. So going on baby steps, walking with the trailer, not even attaching it to the bike, walking with the backpack, not even getting on the bike, just going around the block, and then you're slowly working your way up. So we've got an example here of a trailer, which I like a lot because there's obviously benefits and downsides to being fully enclosed, but if the comfort level of the dog is such that it makes sense, I love this idea of having a little hole for the head to come out of the top. And it looks like you got some gear to carry here. So this looks like a bike packing dog for sure.
Kevin, I have a ton of anecdotes. As you show these photos, I'm thinking about all these situations. I found most of these photos. I know most of these people. And I was biking in Patagonia. This is actually not that dog. This is my buddy Elliot's dog. But in Patagonia, I met this couple that had exactly like one of these, burleys they towed behind the bike. They had a little Jack Russell in it, and sometimes the dog would jump out and it would jog alongside them, but mostly it just sat and slept in the back of this thing. Had a place that its head could poke out. It has windows on the sides the dog can watch. But I love what you said about just having the bike and the thing they'll be in out and about so they get used to the smell. With my cat, we do that. I think that's why he likes bikes so much, is I'm always doing stuff with bikes. I'm always fixing bikes. I've put catnip in places that I like being, so he'll come and hang out with me. And so now he has these positive associations with bicycles and spending time with me.
So take it slow, I think, is step 1. Introducing this activity a little bit at a time. And the other thing is, specifically, if you are going to be doing any kind of exercise with any kind of animal, having reasonable expectations, making sure that the animal itself is set up, has the ability to do what you're asking it to do. And so on that note, do we have any special guests, Sylvie?
Yeah, we have a special guest who is a vet, and so I think this is the stuff she'll really be able to speak to. And if people have questions, put them in the chat. But I had a couple of questions about like deciding what kind of pet is a good pet to take with you on a bike. So let's welcome the special guest.
Hi guys, I'm Amari, my dog Lucy.
Hi, Lucy.
She's an example of a pet that does not bike well.
Yeah. So, I mean, quick introduction and then talk about why the pet doesn't bike well.
Yeah. So, I'm here in Northern Virginia. It's a little different climate, but I went to vet school in upstate New York. Shout out to Ithaca Roots, where I met Sylvie, and then came down here a few years ago where I practiced at a small animal, so cats and dogs practice. And the reason Lucy's not a good dog to bike with is she certainly has the muscle, certainly has the stamina, but she also has a strong drive to chase things. So if another dog or a squirrel runs by, she is very strong and could definitely take my bike in the opposite direction than I planned. So I think one really important part of knowing if your dog is a good dog to bike with is knowing your dog's behavior, what drives them, what they're motivated by, and how they'll be in that whatever environment you're biking in.
That makes a lot of sense. I think the other thing that I think about regarding the dog itself is I've at least anecdotally heard that dogs historically are designed for shorter bursts of speed and not necessarily endurance running. So doing a marathon with a dog would be a bad idea, but doing a short distance is that accurate?
Yeah. So I mean, I think a lot of dogs can go for a few miles, but only a few can go much longer than that. And a lot about training a dog for biking is like training a human for biking, right? You wouldn't just get on a bike after not biking for years and bike 10 miles. And you wouldn't expect your dog to be able to do that either. So training them up, not just to be used to the bike and stuff, but also to slowly increase your distance and to really listen to your dog in terms of what they're capable of. I think the dog should always be the leader, and the dog should not be dragging behind. That to me indicates that they're ready to slow down. And if you're not, that's when you can start to get into trouble. I don't have like a magic, if your dog weighs this much, it can go this many miles. There's certainly different breeds that can go much farther than others. My colleague has a Brittany that bikes with her, and she can go for a good 3 miles, no problem, and not, be too winded. Whereas a lot of other dogs, 3 miles would be pretty far. So I wouldn't take them on a marathon bike ride, but there are certain dogs that definitely want to run. And, I think about Vizslas and different working dogs. I mean, they love to run. And so biking with them is an awesome way to get them good exercise.
Yeah, I think I like that idea of letting the dog take the lead and let you know how far it wants to go. Although I do sometimes see the guy in my neighborhood who doesn't even pedal and he just lets the dog, tow him down the street. And that seems immoral slightly, but I don't know.
Yeah. You will say that, just like people, dogs age. So if you've had a dog for years that maybe did bike really well and starting to hit their senior years and maybe dealing with some arthritis, maybe cut down on how often you're biking or how far you're biking or what you request of them. So really, think about your dog like you would think about yourself and how you train, how you recover, what you bring with you. Make sure you always have water, and as you age, how you do it.
Yeah, and I like you mentioned age, because Sylvie was talking about dogs being too old to push too far, and then also pushing dogs when they're too young. Is that right, Sylvie?
Yeah, I was told that dogs, bones and muscles and joints, don't develop fully till they've gotten to be about 1, and so taking a dog out biking with you when it's too young could have some lasting health effects. What do you think?
So it's true. A lot of dogs' joints aren't closed. Their growth plates are open until around 1 year of age. That's true. But I have a coworker that puts it nicely. Do you put kids in a box until they're 18? Kids' joints aren't used until they're fully grown either. And yet, if you watch the Olympics, there's 13-year-old girls performing, in gymnastics doing high intensity work. So I think that, yes, take that into account. Know that your puppy's younger. Puppies, they have higher caloric needs. So going for a bike ride in the middle of the day for an adult dog, they might not need a snack, but a puppy would. You don't want their glucose to drop too low. And same as before, you don't want to drag your puppy crazy distances. But I definitely think starting them young in terms of getting used to the bike and making it a really positive experience, always having treats on you, starting by just walking. You might have gone over some of this, sorry I was late, but I think starting young is a good thing. Just, temper your expectations of what you want from them.
If I am going to do a physical activity with a dog, is there a danger of too much, should I not feed them lunch halfway through, or too much water? Is there cramps or something? Because I know that that's a thing with people, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't know as much about cramps and things like that. Like I said, with puppies, there's the concern that their blood glucose can drop too low. And so I would definitely have at least a small snack for a very young dog. I wouldn't feed them an enormous big dinner, but having some kibble, I think is a good idea. And I would always offer water pretty consistently. And I wouldn't hold it till the end, because then they may drink really excessively. But mostly just making sure that the temperature is appropriate. So if we're in hot weather, going in the morning or the evening when temperatures have cooled down, dogs are wearing a lot of fur and they have a lot of clothes on. So make sure they can cool off. I know, with Lucy, if she's really hot, getting her wet really helps to cool her down. So if you have a longer bike ride planned in a warmer day, make sure there's someplace you can stop along the way, dip them in a stream, let them cool off, recover, get some water, and maybe that's enough to help them get home. But yeah, be cognizant of the temperature.
And then the other thing I was thinking about the temperature that I've heard about, I feel like more recently people are sort of more aware of the feet and how hot the pavement can get. Is there a danger of getting? Well, I know that there's a danger of them being burned, but is there any downside to getting little booties and putting them on a dog?
Oh, well, ask Lucy. She thinks they're just the worst, right? Yeah. We tried that when she was going to be on a lake, a frozen lake. We tried booties, but she wasn't a big fan. But no, I don't see a downside in booties as long as the dog will tolerate it and they'll stay on. I think that's it's going to be safer to do that than just see. Think about dogs' paws like your paws. If they are an apartment dog that hasn't set foot on rough terrain and maybe ever in their life, they are not going to have calluses. Whereas a farm dog that's outside all the time, they're going to have callus paws and they're going to be able to keep up on a dirt trail much better than that, that poodle that hasn't left the apartment complex in 6 months. So think about it that way. If you wouldn't walk on a path or run on a path in terms or cement based on how hot it is, I'd try to avoid having your dog do it. I mean, if they're running fast enough, but asphalt can get pretty hot. And we do see all the time burnt, sloughed paws. If they tend to get really cracked, if you notice your dog's paws getting really cracked, you can use Aquaphor moisturizer on it. Obviously if it's infected or bleeding, don't, talk to your veterinarian. But if you have a pup that has really calloused paws and keeps up fine, but you notice they can get cracked, Aquaphor is a good option.
Cool. I didn't know that. That's my main question. Sylvie, what do you got?
That was awesome stuff. I think the last thing I'm thinking, going off of this kind of this dog, anatomy and physiology piece is, we haven't gotten into this yet, but choosing the devices that you take a dog out on. So, if they'll be on a leash, if they'll be on some kind of harness setup, if they'll be in a back pat. But I'm thinking, so dogs don't have sweat glands. Is that the deal? They have to sweat out of the mouth?
Yeah, so
how that goes?
Cooled off. Yeah, so their paws, they'll kind of sweat through their paws, but mostly they're going to pant to cool off.
Okay, so this is my question then, is I've seen some people will choose to put on one of those, I guess it's not a muzzle when it's meant to guide them, but if a dog can't open its mouth quite as much and it's jogging, then it seems like that type of device isn't going to be ideal, even though it's going to allow you to guide it the same way you might with a horse and a bit. But Do you have a suggestion of what you think a dog should like have on and then be attached to if it's jogging alongside of you?
I always err on preferring harnesses because, kind of my brain goes to worst case scenarios. Let's say you do come to an abrupt stop or, some accident happens. I would much rather the pressure be on the chest of the dog because, that's going to be a lot stronger than their neck. So a harness or a collar or one of those gentle leaders around their snout. I mean, if the line gets yanked and their head gets whipped, I'm going to worry a lot more about their neck than if their whole chest, gets pulled. So, I always prefer harnesses. And I think that I'm blanking on the name, but there's different kind of techniques for attaching the dog to the bike. And you might have better wording for it, but there's the ones that go out towards the front and the ones out towards the side that have distance from the bike themselves. And some of those have like a bungee aspect to it to give more. But I'd always prefer the pressure to be on the back, or if the dog, like your neighbor, whoever that was, likes to pull, I'd rather them pull based on their chest muscles than their neck. And if a dog has ever had any sort of back injury or is prone to back injuries, it's going to be a lot safer to have a large harness on.
Yeah, I've got a gentle leader, and we use that with our most grumpy of the 3 dogs that we have. But never, I wouldn't use it when moving at speed or even like running, I feel like. Because, when we're moving, it's fine. But if there's going to be that abrupt start or abrupt stop, I could imagine that being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Cool. So I also have just, the regular chest harness here that we use for Cole. So it's pulling from behind the shoulders as opposed to around the neck. And that seems to work pretty well for him.
Yeah.
So that's my example. Cool.
So I know you have a busy life. Feel free to stay as long as you want, and maybe we'll have some questions come in. We have a little slideshow with mostly photos of pets that we know and some of the cool ways of kind of moving them by bike. So I'd love to dive into that, and if you want to hang out as long as you like, and feel free to comment if you see things. You know this puppy. Yeah. This is Osa.
Yeah, well, one last shout out for this puppy and all the other puppies out there like to ride in backpacks. Make sure we've got a secure way of keeping them in that backpack because we don't want that pup going anywhere.
Yeah, so I think I saved a slide for it towards the end, but I've got the, and this is not a sponsorship, I just bought it because I liked it. Well, technically it was a gift, but the Canine Sports Sac. So it's a backpack specifically designed for dogs. And in addition to having a place to clip the collar into the top and having places for the paws, front paws to come out of the top, it's got tons of these clips and cinches. So it's not flopping around loose in the bag. It gets down really nice and tight. And what I've found is it's getting into the bag that's the slightly stressful part for Cole. But once he's in there, he's really locked in and there's nowhere to move. And he seems to really enjoy it.
So I'll try not to jump in too many times, but just that does remind me something in terms of getting a dog used to something new, whether it's the booties or the backpack or just the bike in general, is, that's a great thing to do when they're puppies, getting them, I wouldn't go from buying that backpack to putting the dog in it and going for a bike ride in the same, hour. I would have that backpack out for a few days. I would give them treats when they're near the backpack. I'd have them practice touching the backpack with treats and really easing them into it with tons of positive reinforcement until they see the backpack and their tails are wagging and they're drooling because they know they get treats.
Yeah, we did a walk around the block a few different times before we actually got up on the bicycle. And then it was just a ride around the block one time, and then we kept it going. And now we've gone a few miles. It's pretty fun. It's a cool tool, yeah. So the first couple slides were, is your pet ready for your ride? And now I want to talk about, is your ride ready for your pet? And so what I mean by that is there are definitely a couple different ways if you're going to travel with an animal. How do you want to do it? The main 3 I think of when I think of traveling with a pet are A, the backpack, which we mentioned, B, the leash attached to the bike in some way, and then C, a trailer where you're putting the pet into something that's attached to the bike. 2 out of 3 of those don't involve exercise for your pet. But I also like having the backpack just as backup, and I feel like that's what the Canine Sports Sac is sort of marketed as, is you can go those long distance hikes with the dog, and then as soon as the dog communicates to you, I'd like to go home now, please, you put the dog in the backpack, and then you get to continue and not have to stress about, dragging the dog along the way. So, fun example of a pet in a trailer. This one is not only, it looks to be fairly custom made. So we've got this webbing, netting that's holding the dog down. We've got some towels that are used for shade, which is great. But I think what this reminds me of is that it's, as much as it may seem like it is, it's not enough to just clip the leash or tie the leash to a basket and put the dog in the basket and have that be the end of it. Having the dog physically prevented from being able to jump out is not only going to make you feel better, but literally the dog is going to feel safer knowing that they're secure in that. So I definitely know situations where someone with a bicycle with a basket and just put the dog in the basket and start riding, and I've 100% know that the dog has jumped out of those baskets in those situations. It's stressful. Similar stories, Sylvie?
Well, I have a photo someplace in the slideshow of this dog named Chuck, who was a bike shop dog again, so like totally used to bikes, and his little basket was on the front of the bike so we could look out and see what was coming. And yeah, he like laid down in the basket, it cinched up on his neck, it was totally cozy, and that was like his place. Like when he wanted to go home, he would get in the basket to be like, okay, well, let's do it.
That's very cool. I like that a lot.
That's him. That's Chuck in his basket. Waiting to leave.
So is this, do you know, like, is this bag like designed for pets?
I think this one was. I think you can actually see the clip. So he's like, clipped into the basket. It cinches all the way down on his body. The inside is nice and cozy. And you talked about weight limits on the bike. That's a big piece of it, is like, this is a front rack that's meant to hold, up to 25 pounds. So Chuck was like maybe a 10-pound dog. He weighed less than my cat. But you definitely don't want to put a dog in, on a bike that isn't suited to hold some weight. The same way you don't want to put people, on the back of a bike that isn't meant to hold a human's weight.
Yeah, I think, there's different kinds of racks for carrying different kinds of things. And I know people that will just, use zip ties to attach a milk crate to the back fender. And I mean, if you're carrying just like a water bottle or something, I could see. And if you get excited, you're thinking like, oh, I'll just put my pet there and it'll work. But I would, if you're going to take this seriously, there are products out there that exist that are specifically designed to carry animals on bikes, and that's the side I would err on for sure. Okay, so you did mention weight limits. Here's a picture of the back of a dog, which is less exciting than the front, but that's okay. So same situation where this one, as far as I can tell, and maybe you have more information about the specific picture, but it seems to be a standard basket, but the difference between this and what makes this better than someone else is that the dog is like a burrito, secured, the whole body is secured in there. So not just clipping the collar to the side of the basket and hoping for the best, you've got the dog really cinched down in there. So that's why I like that one. So weight limits, we already mentioned, there's something to think about in terms of if the rack is, what is it designed for? And not just because the dog physically fits in there doesn't mean that that's a good place for it. This is our good friend Skii and her dog Shifter. They use, as far as I understand it, a mechanism where the leash is attached to the bicycle. Now, if you've got a leash and you're just holding on to the leash and then holding on to the bicycle, there's an obvious danger there, which is that when the dog moves, the handlebars move as well. So having the leash attached to the bike is great. Having the leash attached to something which is attached to the bike is even better. And so they design these, I've got a picture of it maybe in a couple of slides, but it's honest, like you mentioned, Amari, it's like on a spring, and you attach the leash to that, and so there's some bend, so that if the dog did bolt or stop very quickly, it affects your balance a little bit less.
So I have a couple of kind of like thoughts and questions about this, and comments too. One of the things that I know is key is like teaching a dog enough commands that it'll be able to do the things you need. So my sense of it is you kind of need to have like a, going left, going right, slowing, stopping command, and something that like gets the dog's attention back to you, because, if you'll really be like out and navigating, not just like on trails, but, in a city, depending on the place the dog is next to you, it might be tough to like effectively communicate what it needs to do. You don't want to be like making a left, into the dog. So this is something we had a dog we actually sent away to doggy school because she was so bad at like picking up these skills and doing the things that she needed to do. She came back totally obedient until, she'd spent too much time with us, then it was all lost. But what my sense of it is that like you want to begin this stuff again, like Kevin and Amari said, like walking, jogging, get those commands in and then begin implementing them on the bike. Do y'all have anything to add to some of the commands people should have when they jog with a dog alongside?
I don't know that I have a specific command for anything related to a bicycle, but using the same commands I would use when walking, I think. So stop, heel, hey, hold on, you're going a little bit too fast, buddy. Something along those lines. Amari, any specific tips there?
Yeah, one thing to work on too is like you guys are all talking about doing walks and starting that way, which is perfect. And something that people always ask is like, well, how do I teach my dog to turn right? If they don't know what turning right means. And so start by just saying turn whatever you want your right hand signal to be when they do it naturally. So every time you go for a walk, you really have to pay attention, but every time you see them turn right, do the command. You say, right hand turn, whatever it is, and then give them a treat. And then practicing that around the house. Almost all those commands you said can be done just sitting next to you too. And so, wait for them to do the command on their own, say it right away. They really need rapid feedback and kind of teach them from then that forward.
Yeah, I think that goes to the larger point of as exciting as it can be to realize like, oh, I like to ride my bike, I like to walk my dog, let me combine those two things. Having that idea and then doing that thing shouldn't be something that happens in the same day or week or even month, probably. There's a whole bunch of steps that are involved before you're even putting the dog in the backpack or a basket. So if you just have this idea and you want to start riding with the pet on a leash, it's not inherently unsafe, but it is unsafe if you're doing it without if you're not giving it the credence it needs, if you're not treating it with the seriousness of an activity as it is.
Vivi makes a good point that it's not just about like the pet being, ready to go with this, but it's also about the human being, like a, skilled cyclist, that they can like handle a dog, handle all the things, going on around them as well at the same time. Thanks, Vivi. Good point.
You're training the dog, but you're also training the human a little bit. So we mentioned heat a little bit. If you're uncomfortable, the dog's probably uncomfortable as well. They make all kinds of travel water bottles for dogs. I like the one where it's got a little cup at the top and you just kind of squeeze the water bottle and the water comes out and they can lap it up. I think you mentioned Amari, but pour a little water on his back and rub that into his fur. Because if he can't sweat himself, then getting a little water on him, I imagine, would cool him off a little bit.
My cousins used to have poodles, and they began a company that was focused on like making doggy equipment. And one of the best-selling things they had was this like cup that becomes like a doggy cup. Mm-hmm. The company went out of business, but while it was going on, like all the dogs got to be in all the ads, and anyway, lots of cute yellow poodles with bunny cups.
I've got one of those smaller ones where it just sort of collapses and then you pull it open and then you can just pour the water in. And that seems to work pretty well. Cole's pretty picky. So the funniest thing about him, he won't take any treats from strangers, but he will kiss you on the face immediately as soon as he sees you. It doesn't matter who you are. Full mouth kisses, but food is like, I don't know. We'll see. So he's finicky with water too. But he gets thirsty when he's out, even just on the backpack like he is here. So again, this example of the canine sports sack, you can kind of see in this close up his paws go all the way through. I've done it a couple different times where I've had him far enough in to where it's up to his armpits, but I feel like and as much as he doesn't seem to complain too much, but I've also done it where it's just his paws that are in the front there as well, which is that one. So a couple different options, but yeah, bring water with you always. If you're going to bring water for yourself, bring water for the dog. Okay. Any specific companies to call out? as far as gear goes. Anybody?
So I did kind of check on what we call those like attachments to bikes. Usually it's called like a bike leash, a dog bike leash. So one is like the walkie dog bike leash. I'm just going to toss out some names. The bike tow leash, also like that's what it's called, but plain and simple, it's like a stiff attachment to the bike. Usually it mounts on to like the seat post, the saddle. So yeah, that's 2 ways to have the dog attached to the bike and jogging.
So you can see a little
Pedigo cycle leash, which is funny
and
because Pedigo is a bike company, but it's Pets-A-Go. Isn't that good?
Did the ones that you looked up all basically look like this?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it doesn't have the spring. It's just this like kind of solid extension. I also was listening to a woman who has an awesome YouTube video about biking with dogs. And what she does is both the like tow leash attachment as well as having the dog on like a leash. So that what she's doing is like the dog is attached, so it's not going to go anyplace, but she can kind of like adjust and like, you know, gently kind of like pull on the dog so it has its leash attached to its own, like, I don't know if she was using a harness or a collar or what exactly, but she wanted to have that second line so she can help it, like, you know, look the way it needs to in case it's kind of like checking out, you know, cats and stuff.
Sure. And then for me, the one that I'll call out again is Canine Sports Sac. I think it was at the National Bike Summit, which was virtual this last year. But the topic of moving with your dog came up, and someone mentioned this company, and so I looked them up. You can find promo codes online if you just look for them. And this is one of the models where, you know what, in fact, I have their website right here. So they have a couple different models. For your very tiny dogs, it just looks like, I mean, it's adorable, right? Isn't that great? But they make them all the way up into, you know, large, you know, 75, 85 pound dogs. The one that I have, I think, is this one here. And I got it specifically because I wanted to ride with the backpack on while I was riding my bicycle. And it's got the waist strap there too. So I felt like that would make it a little more secure. But they also come in these smaller ones that have all kinds of different colors. And, you know, they look very cute. And so in addition to the most important part, I feel like people assume is just that it's the little places for the arms to come through. But really the best part about it is these straps that go around the back and really cinch the dog in nice and tight. So there's no struggling. There's no I'm freaking out and panicking because there's nothing to do. You're hugged. You're really tight in there. And so that's a cool thing about it.
Wait, Kevin, I think the best thing is when they have the tail hole, and these ones don't have that.
No, there's no tail hole in these, unfortunately. But yes, that would be a fun thing. Oh, the other thing that I got with this is they make, let's see, they have adapters. So it's a little pad that goes down into the bottom of the Sports Sac. So they have a little bit something more to stand up on, which is kind of cool.
Oh my god, and they have name patches.
And they have customizable name patches, which are, of course, very important. So yeah, shout out to Canine Sports Sac. If you want to send me a free name sack for Cole, it's spelled Cole. We would take one in some sort of bright color. If you're watching, just let me know. Okay.
That reminds me of something I just wanted to add when I saw the name tags. Was make sure if you're traveling out there with your pup that they have an ID stored on them. Because if there is any sort of accident or they get loose, really important that there's a way to quickly identify the dog. If they have any sort of, you know, life-threatening disease, diabetes or something like that, but if they were out in the wilderness, make sure that is identifiable on them as well.
Has there been, I feel like there's been advancements in technology with that stuff where I can like track my dog if it leaves and like on my app and stuff. There
are tracking collars. So those are great for you to find the dog if it gets lost from you. So that's an awesome thing. I think like Whistle is one of them, but there's a bunch out there. Those usually, a stranger that finds the pet on the street can't identify it. So that's great for you to keep track of your pup, but make sure that there's some sort of identification collar on the dog for a stranger that if they came across your dog.
And the microchips are pretty standard now too, as well, right?
Yep, yeah. Although a microchip, they would have to bring the dog to like a shelter or a
Sure.
veterinarian's office to be scanned. I think there's some technology of people using their phones, but that's not as common.
Yeah. So the good old-fashioned phone number on the tag is the place to be. Cool. That makes sense.
So this makes me think of people that like to bike with a dog alongside them, like on trails and off leash. And two of the things that happen is, again, you teach a dog how to do this. You have to get them used to bikes. You want to begin like one-on-one, you and the dog. You know, don't decide like, hey, I'm mountain biking with my buddies and I'm going to take my dog too. The chaos is not what a dog wants. But some people like totally believe in having the dog lead, and some people like having the dog follow. And it seems like it kind of comes down to like personal preference, but what I've noticed having done this with people who have dogs that they feel really confident with is that, you know, even the best dogs will not be psychic and they don't know which way you want to go. And so they might have like done a trail, you know, 20 times with you. And if you decide like, oh, I'm going to go left this time, and the dog is, you know, 10, 20, like 50 feet ahead, that's one of those places that you might lose a dog. Something else that came up as a funny example was this guy whose dog loves to lead, but he likes to also stop and look back and like, you know, check that his dude is like keeping up with him. And sometimes, you know, that's ideal because the guy is a couple feet back and like, you know, it makes sense. Sometimes the dog will stop and look back when the guy is like 2 feet behind him. So they've had like a couple of kind of close calls and, you know, almost collisions. So that's one of those places that, depending on how, you know, the dog behaves, you might want to teach that dog to follow you on trails instead of leading. And then again, like coming up with all the commands that you might need so it knows which way to go and, you know, when to stop, when to look back, and so on. But that's definitely a lot of fun if you have a dog that, you know, will just chase you and play outside that way. And then you can be totally independent and they can go as fast as they want. You can go as fast as you want, allowing them to keep up.
So is that, you're talking about like an off-leash situation?
Yeah, totally off-leash,
Wow.
usually mountain biking.
Mm-hmm. So then obviously you'd want to make sure ahead of time that you're in a place where that's allowed and like okay and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, so I think to wrap up, my main points to remember that I've learned are definitely have to do with heat a little bit, especially here in San Diego. I mean, sometimes we forget, like, we do live in a desert. And I feel like at least a couple times a year, there's a local news story about someone who took their dog up mission trails and the dog needed to be airlifted out or didn't make it or anything else. So they're absolutely sensitive to heat, and so that's something to look out for. The other thing I'll take from this is take it slow. Just because you have this idea doesn't mean that it's something you can implement immediately. There's steps that need to be taken, and you're not only training the dog, but you're training yourself as well and making sure everyone's on the same page. Look how excited they are. You hear them right now. Yeah. Lessons learned, Sylvie?
Ooh, the puppies need snacks. I love that lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Parting thoughts, Amari?
No, I think it's awesome. I think it's a great way. I've seen a lot of COVID-15 in our canine friends. We've been seeing a lot of weight gain because dogs are just kind of chilling at home. So getting them out there to enjoy the beautiful land is awesome. Just make sure to do it safely. And if you have other questions, ask your veterinarian.
Yeah, I think my dogs are not excited about me going back into the office. But I love the idea of putting Cole on my back and then riding with him to work. And then he can hang out at work and then we can ride home together. So combining hobbies, I think that's what this is all about. Oh, and yes, Canine Sports Sac. His name spelled C-O-L-E. Send me a personalized patch, please. Okay. Anything else? I think we're good. Thanks, guys, for coming. Thanks for watching, everybody. We're live every Wednesday at 5. Different topics every week. And with that said, thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.